Shrinking for 2 straight quarters and now more spending on Capitol Hill. Executive Vice President at the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, joining us with the latest economic headlines on the Hill. Welcome back, Brandon. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The National Bureau of Economic Research says a recession is, quote, a significant decline in economic activity that is spread across the economy that lasts for more than a few months. The GDP report shows the economy shrank by nearly a percentage point in the second quarter, combining that with the first quarter's 1.6% contraction. And Brandon, why is there any question as to whether or not we are in a recession? Bottom line, Americans are hurting. They are frustrated with inflation and the never-ending rise in price on everything.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason why there's a debate right now is because we're just a few months away from an election. So this is mostly a political argument, not a real substantive argument. And there are some reasons why there are some positive signs in this economy, the labor market being the number one issue that has been strong and that is seemingly all that Biden talks about. But the fact is we've had negative growth. We have inflation that's absolutely uncontrollable right now. And American families, the most important indicator is talking to American families and American businesses. And if you talk to them, I think they will say that something is very, very wrong with this economy. However you want to label it, a recession, a decline, it doesn't matter. People are hurting out there.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because on Thursday night, just last night, President Biden said that the nation's on the right path. The administration arguing we're not in a recession, as you said, because the labor market is so strong. What's your thoughts on this? Why are we seeing these 2 quarters of negative growth and yet we're seeing this strong labor market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very weird economy. But what's, again, most important is to get outside the Beltway and actually talk to real Americans. 88% of Americans right now say this nation is on the wrong track, economically speaking. It's primarily because of inflation. Even in a tight labor market where we've seen some wage increases, people can't keep up with the pace of inflation. Their paychecks aren't large enough to absorb this 9.1% inflation, which is even higher in markets like energy, food, the basic needs that people cannot avoid. It's one thing to skip a meal out or to avoid a vacation and do a staycation instead, but you can't avoid going to the grocery store and the gas station.
And let's talk about the Federal Reserve trying to fight some of this inflation by raising interest rates. Right now, investors fear this could send stocks tumbling even more. How can we expect interest rates to respond, and what does this rate hike mean for the economy as a whole?
I think the biggest impact, the biggest place where you're going to see a change from this rate hike is going to be in housing markets, other areas where you're borrowing money in order to make a purchase. So that could be automobiles, housing. That's going to be the immediate shock there. I don't think that the stock market is going to have a major impact because of this. Of course, we've seen a market correction from the outset of this year, particularly in the tech sector. And the market's going to go up, the market's going to go down. But for the most part, I think what we are going to see is a tapering in prices, particularly in the housing market, particularly in automobiles. That'll cascade down, and we will see eventually lower prices due to the Fed's actions here.
Let's talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Joe Manchin have released some preliminary details. The bill would be paid for in part by taxing corporations some 15%, which some lawmakers argue that that's going to get passed down to the consumer. Tell us about this legislation, this climate and tax legislation, and how it's supposed to reduce the deficit.
Yeah, this is a horrible piece of legislation that's proposed at a really, really awful time. As we're trying to combat inflation, what we're going to see here is an enormous tax increase on American corporations that will absolutely be passed down to consumers. And the areas that are going to be hit the hardest are the manufacturing sector, the very same industry that we are trying to make more competitive globally. This is a real kick at the manufacturing sector at an inopportune time, and those are going to fall. Those price increases are absolutely going to hit everyday working Americans. This is a really, really bad piece of legislation. Now, we've heard time and time from politicians on the left side of the aisle and the right side of the aisle saying, don't raise taxes during a recession. That's one of the reasons why they don't want to admit that this is a recession, because they are trying to raise taxes right now. Really bad news for the economy.
Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jen.
Ahead